Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
Today on Spotlight, WashU develops a new chatbot tool for eating disorder interventions. Plus, a St. Louis prodigy whose groundbreaking work shaped the future he once predicted. And then an artist you can meet at the 2025 St. Louis Art Fair. But first, a book explaining how St. Louisans' lives have been shaped by the Mississippi. It's Sunday, and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
Mississippi River, why do you flow all the way down to the Mexico?
The Mississippi River, beautiful and muddy, swift-moving most days, barely moving on others. It is the father of waters and the mother of invention, a dividing line and a place that unites us.
We're River City. We talk about the river being so important to St. Louis, but if you actually start talking to St. Louisans, a lot of them have very few specific examples of how the river has changed St. Louis. In a lot of ways, it feels like the river is sort of a thing of the past.
It's not, of course, but the river's past is our past.
Some of St. Louis's finest upstanding citizens met their end at the end of a gun barrel on Bloody Island out in the middle of the river. The very first filtered water in St. Louis was as a result of the World's Fair. When they were planning out the fair, they thought of all these beautiful fountains that were going to be spewing water up in the air, and then it dawned on them they were going to be spewing dark brown, disgusting Mississippi River water, and the whole world was coming here to see this.
Yeah, St. Louis obviously had a lot of stake in the rivers.
Now a book celebrates Old Man River like never before, with powerful images that remind us, above all else, the Mississippi River is why we are where we are.
There's all of these ways from throughout history that your life is still tied to the Mississippi River. There are all these really important moments ranging from immigration to hygiene, how St. Louis got rid of its trash for the majority of its history. It's a pretty horrific story that involves the river. But you know, all of these different things, race relations in the city, entertainment, all of these are connected to St. Louis history through the Mississippi River. So this book, instead of just looking at the river as this thing of the past, we wanted to bring it in to St. Louisans' lives today. It looks at 56 sort of snapshots from through St. Louis history, showing all the ways that the river and city have been connected throughout time.
Part of why St. Louis is what St. Louis is, particularly like all the brewing you would think about, has really not that much to do with transportation, but with what the river caused, the caves and so forth.
Obviously, to become one of the biggest brewing cities in the United States, we need a lot of water. So having the Mississippi right there, there's a reason that companies like Anheuser-Busch and the Lemp Brewery, they built their breweries right down next to the river. They were using the caves, as you mentioned, that were underneath. So one of the things people don't think about is how water gets to the Mississippi River. Obviously, it goes through sewer pipes, it goes through streams, but some of it takes a little more of a confusing route where it gets down into the rock beneath St. Louis and actually carves out the caves that are famously beneath the city. So Anheuser-Busch and Lemp both used these caves to refrigerate their beer. They both chopped ice off of the Mississippi River and brought it up as another way to refrigerate their beer. So they were relying on this not only for the water to actually make the beer, but to produce the cold temperatures that were needed for lager beer to ferment. We would not be the big beer city that we are today without the Mississippi in more ways than one.
You are a historian, so by trade you kind of look back.
Right.
But look ahead a little bit. You've gone through all this study now on the river. What do you think the future is for the river and the city?
We're at a point in time where people are realizing what the river is and how beautiful and fragile and important it is. You're starting to see a lot more interest in recreation on the Mississippi River. I think for a long time, St. Louis just thought of the Mississippi as this sort of dirty, slow-moving thing that was, you know, we need it for industry, but that's about it. People are taking a second look. It's really an incredible piece of geography, and few places can claim such an interesting river that's not only so historically important, but also has so much going on around it today. So I think things are looking better for the Mississippi River. People are starting to come to its rescue a little bit more and defend its good name, whereas a long time it was just thought of as something sort of dirty and extra.
Watch the full interview at hecmedia.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
This has been something we've been working on iterations of for quite some time.
It's a chat tool for people with eating disorders.
It's letting me know that there's a number of approaches that we can try for reframing negative thoughts that we're having about our body. For example, we can try body acceptance strategies, body positivity. We developed this tool using rule-based AI, where all the responses were written by clinical experts, including myself, a psychiatrist, individuals on our team. We spent years really perfecting these responses and deciding all of the rules that would allow individuals to go down different paths within the tool. People can write in responses, some spots where they can kind of click buttons to make it easier for them to progress through. It's asking somebody to really start to think about this issue. Tell me more.
Dr. Ellen Fitzsimmons-Kraft and her colleagues developed the chat tool. She's an associate professor of psychology and brain sciences and psychiatry at Washington University in St. Louis. Fitzsimmons-Kraft says eating disorders are one of the deadliest forms of mental illness.
Up to 10% of the population in the U.S. will experience an eating disorder at some point in their lifetime. That's a huge number of people. That's up to 30 million people here in the United States. And at the same time, 80% of people with eating disorders never receive any kind of treatment. And even when they do receive treatment right now, usually it's not evidence-based. Our, medical providers and mental health providers in this country are not trained in this problem.
Even if someone finds a proper clinic for eating disorders, she says there are long waits, up to a year, and high treatment costs.
Eating disorders involve disturbances in one's eating behaviors and typically a really high level of concerns about someone's weight and shape. There's several different types of eating disorders.
That's why she says this is critical.
And so we had the thought that this kind of completely self-guided digital tool could offer a solution to this extremely wide treatment gap that we have. That maybe a chatbot could be a way to make our digital program available in a more engaging format, something that people could engage with kind of on the go in brief messages with warm, empathic responses. It kind of goes through a flow of checking in with people. How's your day going? Kind of providing some tailored feedback. And then it might say, okay, we're going to go into our particular topic for today.
But for years, she says the investment was lacking, so the idea was not scalable. Until now, Fitzsimmons-Kraft and her colleagues were awarded a 5-year, $3.7 million grant from the National Institutes of Health. They will be optimizing a self-guided, chatbot-based digital intervention with the goal of making eating disorder counseling more readily available to all.
And that the chatbot could also do some of the things that human coaches did in our prior programs.
She says the need is more crucial than ever because other chatbots can give dangerous information to people with eating disorders.
There are risks when generative AI comes into play.
She says those who are using ChatGPT-style large language models run the risk of polluting data with whatever gets pulled from the internet. A recent report found that these programs generate harmful eating disorder content at an alarming rate.
What it found was that 41% of the time, general-purpose generative AI tools like ChatGPT were giving harmful responses to eating disorder-related prompts. The chatbot, the ChatGPT-based tool, gave very specific suggestions about how to hide food away from their parents so that their parents might think they were eating when they weren't.
Children and adults at any age run the risk of exposure to misguided and harmful information when they are having a problem, which is likely to happen at a more vulnerable age.
95% of individuals with an eating disorder, their problem onsets before the age of 25. So these are problems that often start in adolescence or young adulthood, and then can really become entrenched from there. And now it's asking me and saying, it seems like you're really struggling right now. If it's starting to feel too much, I can share helplines and someone trained can support you. At the end of the study, if we demonstrate effectiveness of this tool, there might be multiple pathways to dissemination.
For original programming and award-winning content, explore hecmedia.org. Find all of your favorite genres, including the arts and sciences. Go in-depth with the latest research. Get insight into new technologies. Learn about breakthrough discoveries. Find it all in one place. Explore hecmedia.org.
History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, President of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. Frank Kurtz was born in St. Louis in 1923. At the age of 16, he began his physics studies at Washington University, where he caught the attention of the Manhattan Project. Director of Curatorial Affairs, Hattie Felton, shares the story of a St. Louis kid with big dreams.
St. Louis native Frank Kurtz was a child prodigy turned Renaissance man. When Kurtz painted this eye-catching self-portrait in 1946, he was not yet 25 years old. And although his accomplishments are almost forgotten today, Frank Kurtz was one of St. Louis's brightest minds in the 20th century. Frank Kurtz was born in St. Louis in 1923. We don't know what his early school years were like, but if his latter academic success is any indication, he likely excelled. Kurtz quickly moved into high school coursework at Roosevelt High School. While there, he honed his writing skills as a reporter for the school newspaper, practiced French as vice president and treasurer of the French Club, and played a part in numerous other committees. And somehow, while balancing the club's committees and classes, Kurtz managed to skip ahead several grades, allowing him to graduate early and begin his studies at Washington University at the age of 16. At Washington University, Kurtz delved into the world of physics. His aptitude and enthusiasm earned notice from the Manhattan Project, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers research project responsible for developing nuclear weapons during World War II. Kurtz worked on the project as a junior physicist to help construct the university's first cyclotron, a particle accelerator. His knowledge of experimental nuclear physics, radiochemistry, and the operation of Geiger counters made him a valuable asset to the project. In 1944, at the age of 20, he graduated with his master's degree in physics. 2 years later, he graduated again from Washington University, this time with a law degree. At Johns Hopkins University, Kurtz continued his education in physics and graduated with a PhD in 1948, all while studying law on the side at George Washington University. Back in St. Louis, Kurtz opened a law practice where he combined his passion for science with a love of law into his work as a patent attorney. But if you could talk to that young man in the painting, he likely wouldn't brag about his education and accomplishments. Instead, he might talk about what the future could look like, a future we live in today. In 50 years, predicted Kurtz in 1954, humans could wear wristwatches with two-way radio capabilities, transmit power without wires, project color TV onto the walls of their homes, and make plans for trips to Mars. Passionate about education and sharing his interests with the public, Kurtz gave talks on machines of the future, inventing, psychology, and engineering. His approach always focused on making a better tomorrow.
Next week on History Spotlight, the first president to ride in an airplane and how that flight is connected to St. Louis.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org. Later on Spotlight, using music to help foster kids reclaim their lives. Mark your calendars. The 2025 St. Louis Art Fair returns September 5th through the 7th. Get a sneak peek at the talent behind the canvas with HEC Media's Meet the Artist series. Before you even step foot at the fair, discover in-depth insights into each artist's creative process and what inspires their work. Watch now at youtube.com at Who Else Loves Art and look for the 2025 St. Louis Art Fair playlist.
I'm Mariana Malachek. I make acrylic paintings of imagined interior spaces that celebrate vintage furniture and interior design. I'm really detail-oriented and ultimately really want to capture like character, charm, and like nostalgia of these old pieces and interior design trends. I've been doing art basically my whole life. My grandma was a watercolor artist, and growing up she let me play with her art supplies. In college is when I gravitated more towards acrylic and painting more everyday domestic objects. And there was one day where I just felt like painting just a small bedroom scene. And I remember wanting to make it look sort of like a dollhouse. And I guess I just kind of unintentionally included some like retro elements. So I guess that's kind of what sparked my interest in more retro and mid-century modern design trends, and now led me to painting my little rooms. I think that there's a timeless appeal. Yeah, there's a nostalgia, and people who are older than me recognize it a lot, but also it's definitely back in style, so people my age are decorating their houses with like newly made pieces that mimic it, so there's a general appeal towards it, but I really like the older original stuff. I think it's really fun, and I also really love when they're super bizarre looking and they chose the weirdest colors. Like, why did we have pink tubs? That was such a strange choice. Usually I'll start with like a focal piece of furniture and then start finding other pieces that fit that time period. And I'll look on resale and auction sites or old vintage catalogs like Sears and JCPenney catalogs for other pieces that match with that specific era or trend. And once I have all of the pieces to make up a room, I'll assemble them in a little digital collage. So once I have all of that assembled, I'll just transfer it to my panel and start painting. It's really rewarding when people will stop and say like, oh my gosh, that reminds me of my childhood home or a relative's home. I think it's really cool that something just like a lamp or something like that can be so universal in sparking memories. But it's also fun when people will just kind of laugh at how ridiculous something is. I want my paintings to serve as little portals to past periods, and like people can kind of find little traces of their histories in them.
HEC has been bringing you positive programming and award-winning content for decades. Arts, education, culture, in-depth discussions, films, and more. All in one place, hecmedia.org.
You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight.
At first glance, this looks like a regular city street. But look a little closer, and you'll see this city is actually much less than meets the eye, at least in terms of its size.
This project is our Washington University in St. Louis mini-city that has a series of different attributes that you can mistake for a real city. It's pretty big. It's about 30 feet by 100 feet. The scale is 1:8 scale. For comparison, Barbie is about 1:6, to give you a sense of things that you might have interacted with.
And that scale is important because the goal is to test autonomous vehicles in a realistic but safe way.
Is typically the evaluation of autonomy of any kind has kind of two phases. One is in simulation, which is relatively easy, relatively low cost, but of course there's always a gap to what actually really happens. The other is actual physical scale. Now, in physical scale, you can't take really major risks. For example, any risk of crashing, you could crash on people, for example. There's all kinds of issues when taking major risks. Here, we can actually take pretty substantial risks without really severe consequences. Worst case scenario, okay, we damage, for example, a car. Okay, not great, but not tragic, as opposed to, for example, a real car crashing into something.
But creating this mini city took a rather unusual collaboration between the university's departments of computer science and architecture.
The city has convincing mailboxes, facades, trash cans, trees, people. The people don't walk around. Everybody always asks that. They're not motorized. But composing the city really was a question of like looking into, okay, what do you encounter? How is a crosswalk going to be identifiable? Okay, we've got to paint a crosswalk that looks similar. Color matching, we would go out into the street and like color match our yellow paints from Home Depot to the actual paint on the street. So there was a lot of reproduction of reality in this sort of way that you might think about a theater set being built.
As far as the actual testing on those roads go, they're still in the early phases of what's set to be a 10-year project, one they hope will provide results that are helpful in the real world.
Hoping to get information to facilitate research improvements and advances. For example, right now what we're doing is autonomous lane following. We're building a car to be able to follow lanes, stay kind of in the middle of the lanes without much information except for predominantly visual information that it perceives as it drives. That's an extremely difficult task because typically in autonomy you have things like GPS, which gives you very precise location. Especially indoors we don't have such precision in terms of location. So this becomes a more challenging problem. It tests the technology that uses just purely visual information for this task.
And this project may also prove beneficial for the architects designing the cities of the future.
I mean, it certainly shaped the way that I'm, moving forward in my research and thinking, and really the questions that I'm asking about the urban and architectural environment in relation to urban scale AI and autonomous vehicles come from thinking about this project. So we're now working on drawings of cities with unusual transportation systems or innovative smart cities, and thinking about how policies are being developed in those places. And at the same time, thinking about how the scope of safety, public health, dealing with problems like climate change that have been so greatly exacerbated by vehicles, how we can really improve upon those things given the wider introduction of autonomous vehicles into our lives at the scale of the city, our globe.
Like, comment, and subscribe to support arts, education, and culture.
At 57 years old, Melanie Baer is learning to play the harp. For Melanie, music is a lifeline.
Part of the reason it's so healing is the vibration from the instrument is just very soothing and very comforting.
You see, music was there for Melanie when no one else was. By the time she was 10 years old, she was in and out of 20 foster homes.
What got me through that was obsessive listening to music. The song that comes to mind that I heard most frequently was The Carpenters. Music was like the companion that would go from placement to placement to placement. When everything else was changing, the music was constant.
At 10 years old, Melanie was eventually adopted by a family here in Missouri. Today, through the not-for-profit she founded called Music That Reclaims, she is playing it forward. Its mission is making music available to foster and adopted kids and reclaiming the childhood they've lost. Through Music That Reclaims, Melanie takes foster and adopted kids to concerts like this one at Powell Symphony Hall.
I found music that I can connect with, an easy way to let my feelings go, kind of relax and be not as anxious, and it helps me deal with my depression.
14-year-old Lily Cooley, who is now adopted, loves attending these concerts. She says left alone as a child by her drug-addicted birth mother, it was music that soothed her. Today, like Melanie, it's the music of pop artists and another brother-sister duo that speaks to her.
I really like Billie Eilish. I was waiting for this moment to come to the symphony. It was awesome. It's so cool.
For 11-year-old Aiden, this was his very first concert. Thanks to Music That Reclaims, he's also now playing his first instrument.
That's right. Aiden was gifted an instrument. He chose the tuba.
I really wanted to be a tuba player is to test my limits, how much I can do.
Before his recent adoption into the Schutz family, Aiden was in and out of 13 foster homes. Now with his new tuba, courtesy of Music That Reclaims, and his service dog Bella by his side, he is thriving.
It's okay, Bella. It's like so like calming. Making the tones, like holding the tuba and like taking a lot of deep breath and play songs.
I have to plan everything out, so we have 30 minutes a day, and we label it jokingly as honk the tuba.
Scott and Brandy are now Aiden's parents. They say the tuba helps with his emotional tone.
And he'll pull it out sometimes when he's frustrated, and he'll blow on it, and you know he's mad because you hear these really like angry, hard notes, and you're like, ooh, somebody's mad. Then it gets lighter as he goes, and then he starts playing his piece, and you're like, okay, he just worked through it, we're good.
I always say that when words fail, music speaks.
Lily Carr is a music therapist. Many of her students, like 15-year-old Carmen, are in foster care. They use music therapy sessions like this one, provided by Music That Reclaims, to work through the pain in their lives.
I think music is an alternative to medication. When I'm down and I start singing, it can remind me of like, I don't know, I feel like the music's talking to me. 'Cause I like you. Good job, Carmen.
9-year-old Shania is also in foster care.
The way I shine, I know you've seen it.
You just listen to the words. The words will tell you how the beat is going. When you sing the song, it goes in your heart and it goes in your brain, and it makes you feel happy.
And then we got what?
I see it, I like it, I want it.
Happy.
Hey!
Music That Reclaims is reclaiming the lives of those in foster and adoptive care. A musical mission from a woman who knows firsthand the saving grace of a melody.
You know where the children have been, you know the places that they've been and the things they've never been able to experience, and to actually be able to accommodate them and let them see what's possible, the opportunities, the music, and actually experience its joy and its healing powers is really what it's all about.
Next week, a part of the botanical garden that's been seen by very few people, plus a creative way to show people St. Louis. Find out which painting is her favorite. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.